In 1927, people have gathered in a quiet place in Maharashtra to burn a 2000-year-old book. This was led by none other than one of the most intellectual personalities of modern India, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. This book has been debated, has been cursed, has been challenged, has been discussed in a variety of forums, and still can be quoted as one of the sophisticated books ever written about the legal outcomes of ancient India. And here's why this book is important. Many people who condemn the book actually haven't read it. And today, in this video series, we are going to try and deep dive into Manusmriti. There is no agenda, there is no worship, pure curiosity and exploration. So let's go. Before we talk about Manusmriti, we should talk about the source of it. Now, where does Manusmriti originate from? In fact, the entire Hindu knowledge base comes from the Vedas. These Vedas are divided into 4 parts: the Rig Veda, the Yajur Veda, the Sama Veda, the Atharva Veda. The Vedas are also commonly known as the Shruti, or which has been listened to. It is believed that ancient knowledge seekers of India, or the Rishis, have listened to these Vedas when they were doing their tapasya. And these knowledge sources have then been shared with the general public. Now, what many eminent scholars of that time have realized that these Vedas are far too complex to be understood by the common man. And hence, they started giving their interpretation of these Vedas, simplifying them and sharing them as a codex or a rule book for the common crowd. These interpretations came to be known as Smritis. Now, as I mentioned, there are a lot of people who have conducted these interpretations, and hence there are a lot of Smritis that are in existence. Manusmriti, the focus of this video series, is one of those interpretations that was made by Manu. Now, who is this Manu? According to some of the texts, Manu is not a person. Manu is a title. The Hindu literature, the Sanatan Dharma, believes in the cyclical nature of time. And during each cycle, the entire world is ruled and the entire creation is done by one Manu. Now, in total, we have 14 Manus, and at present, we are led by the 7th Manu, who is the Vaivasvata Manu. However, coming to Manusmriti, it is said that Manusmriti was written by the very first Manu, who is the Swayambhu Manu. Now, one thing which we need to understand is that while the Vedas are the root, the Smritis are the interpretation. So there will always be some subjectivity that we need to understand, will creep in when we are studying these books. Now, did one person write the Manusmriti? Well, the answer is no. Linguistic experts believe that Manusmriti was at least written over a period of 500 to 1000 years, with the latest work getting added as late as 200 CE. Now, it is understood that such a complex piece of work would obviously be subjected to a lot of changes or a lot of reinterpretations based on the socio-economic conditions of that particular time. There are some people who argue that out of the 2600 plus verses on Manusmriti, almost half of them are original, while the rest of them have been added in the later period for various reasons. And these additions have been called as the Authorship. So, at the end of the day, it is still a text written by humans for humans, and it kind of carries a weight that is much bigger. Now to the meat of the topic. What exactly is written in Manusmriti? Now, a lot of people quote very specifically chosen verses in Manusmriti and deem the entire book as illogical, oppressive, and a means for subjugation. But when you actually get deep dive into the book, you will find that this is not as simple as it seems. This book has been written as a framework. It is in fact referred to as Manu Dharma Shastra, where dharma means rules both of a society as well as an individual. And there are many complex aspects or sophisticated aspects written in the book which cover surprisingly creation, the Varnashrama system, the Chaturvarna system, the rules of a king, rules of inheritance, marriage, rituals, rules of law and punishment, and various other aspects which are necessary to live and to survive as a society and as an individual. Now, there are many aspects of Manusmriti which are actually far advanced, considering that these were written thousands of years ago. And there are some aspects of Manusmriti which seem not great or something which many people will not agree with. And in fact, it is these aspects which are creating all these controversies. So, while you're reading the book, keep an open mind, and while watching these video series as well, let's try to understand what is the good and what is the bad in this book. For us to understand Manusmriti, we need to understand a very fundamental aspect of Sanatana Dharma, which is the Chaturvarna system. Now, this is probably one of the most ancient and surviving socio-fabric to exist ever in the world. Now, what is this Chaturvarna system? So, according to the Vedas as well as Manusmriti, depending on the role that you conduct in the society, you are divided into one of the four classes. You have the Brahmin, the Kshatriya, the Vaishya, and the Shudra. Now, as we deep dive into Manusmriti, we will see that there are definitions for each of these classes, rules that have been associated with each of these classes, behaviors and duties that they are expected to perform. Now, one thing which I understood or observed when reading the Manusmriti is that a lot of emphasis seems to be given to first the Brahmin class and then the Kshatriya class. In fact, 90% of the verses in this book are attributed to these two classes. The Vaishyas and the Shudras have not more than 10% of verses allocated to them. However, one important distinction that I've observed was, while the Vedas talk about the Chaturvarna system as a more fluid concept, where irrespective of your birth, it is the role that you play in the society that determines your Varna. Manusmriti kind of talks about it as an inherited property. So if you are born into a Kshatriya family, irrespective of whether you have the capability to protect or whether you have the capability to fight, you are still called a Kshatriya. Another aspect that I have observed and we need to make note of is that Manusmriti doesn't seem to be accepted universally even during the time when it was active. In fact, other similar works like the Yajnavalkya Smriti and even some verses of the Rig Veda seem to be completely opposite to what is mentioned in the Manusmriti. And these contradictions again emphasize the fact that these interpretations were subjective and were probably used by certain sections of the society for maintaining law and order and maybe even maintaining some sort of superiority. So, now to the final aspect. What do I like and dislike about Manusmriti? While we are going to talk about this book in detail in the upcoming videos, I want to leave you with some of the thoughts that I have. Whatever be the controversial nature of this book, one thing which we have to understand and even acknowledge is that this is perhaps a very sophisticated book considering the time when this was written. The way it talks about the rules of law, the way it talks about inheritance, the Varnashrama Dharma, the rules of a king, the duties of a king, the punishments, it feels like this is far more advanced for the age where it originates from. Especially when you talk about the Varnashrama Dharma, the different rules depending on at what stage of life a person is, it talks about the duties, and these duties are something which I feel are essential even in the modern day. Many aspects of the book seem relevant even today. However, there are some aspects which I don't agree with. For example, Manusmriti talks about different punishments for the same crime for different varnas. Now, where is the equality in that? I, as a person, believe, irrespective of whether you are a king or a commoner, for the same mistake, your punishment should be the same. Equality above all. Another aspect that I see is they seem to be a bit demeaning, or maybe even a bit discriminatory towards women and the Shudras. Now again, there are contradictions here as well, which we will deep dive, because there are some verses in the script which talk about the greatness or the importance of women, especially a mother. On the other aspect, some verses talk about how a woman is not supposed to be independent and should always depend either on their father or the husband or the son. So there are several such contradictions that exist within the book, be it for the women or for the Shudras, that make me think whether this was actually written by one person, or is it something, or maybe some aspects have been added later just because some section of the society felt like they are losing their superiority. Now that's a food for thought. So we're done with the end of the video, and if you like this video, if you like this content, please come back and help me, support me in the subsequent versions of the videos where we deep dive into each chapter of Manusmriti and we explore what is written in it, what is good about it, what is bad about it. Welcome to the journey.